Anger over corruption can spark mass demonstrations and even topple governments, as we saw with the Arab Spring. But a new global study finds that deeply rooted corruption is not going away.
Despite changes in the Middle East and Asia, the study finds corruption to be notably on the rise in some places. VOA's Jeff Seldin took a look at this story, and we talked with Jeff. Let's begin with the start of his report.
The anti-corruption watchdog group Transparency International's 2012 Corruption Perception Index graded 176 countries on a scale of 0 to 100, with 0 being the most corrupt. More than two-thirds, including Cambodia, rated as moderately to highly corrupt. Transparency International's Huguette Lebel.
Those countries that are at the bottom are very often countries where human rights have been repressed, where you see civil conflicts, where you see failed states.
So, Jeff, this Corruption Perceptions Index by Transparency International, what type of corruption are we talking about?
Well, one of the most prevalent forms in a lot of the countries is something that some experts like to call bakshish, which, depending on who you talk to, it's a form of charity or it's really a payoff.
You make this gesture like the
Well, it's a payoff.
Gesture,
In some countries, it's, if somebody helps you out a little bit, you're obligated to help them out a little bit. And a lot of times with officials, it's in the form of money. Another day on the streets of Phnom Penh for Cambodian motorcycle taxi driver Chum Van. And another day spent worrying about corruption.
Corruption in my country has been getting worse every year, more and more in all aspects. It's a problem in traffic accidents. Drivers who have money, the police will back them, and they consider the driver without money as the one at fault.
In some ways, it's a bribe, and to get your kid into the right school or to get medical services, sometimes you have to pay a little bit extra, and if you don't come up with the money, then you don't get that service, or you're not able to sell your goods, or you don't get the protection you need for your shop, and next thing you know, you're the victim of a crime.
What were some of the things that struck you that were mentioned, these forms of corruption that you're talking about, by the people that were featured in your piece?
Well, corruption isn't anything new, but the thing that comes across is just the ongoing frustration when you talk to the real people. In many parts of the world, it is the small businesses that corruption hurts most. At this small clothing shop in Abuja, Nigeria, Ukudi Nawa says the situation makes her feel sick.
It makes me spend more, and then most of the times the customers don't even get to understand. Like you charge and they're like, why are you charging so much?
A frustration shared by many. There was one shop owner in Pakistan, and you see in his shop he had a wall of appliances and other products behind him, and he said, because of corruption, we're starving. The countries that traditionally score low on the Corruption Perceptions Index, they're always at the bottom. The countries that do well, they're always at the top. And in a lot of ways, what the index found and what the surveys found is that there hasn't been a lot of movement.
Let's talk about that, the rankings, where some of these countries stand. Which ones were the ones that ranked as the most corrupt and which were the ones that were ranked as the least?
Well, the ones that ranked as the most corrupt really are no surprise. You have Afghanistan, which has been at the bottom for a long time. You have Somalia and you have North Korea. Perhaps nowhere has the outcry about corruption been more visible than the Middle East, where millions took to the streets to topple regimes from Tunisia to Egypt to Libya. But while there have been changes at the top, little is changing on the ground. Distinguished scholar Robin Wright at the Woodrow Wilson Center says that's no surprise.
Bakshish is a concept that is central to the way of life in the Middle East, bakshish being bribes. And that hasn't changed overnight with the introduction of democratic ideals or goals. A Libyan businessman said, we used to have one Gaddafi, now we have 6 million.
And then the ones at the top, no surprise there either. You have Denmark, you have Finland, some of the Scandinavian countries, some of the smaller European countries that have not been hit as hard by the economic crisis. And then you have a whole bunch of countries somewhere in the middle, although the way they do the rankings, a score of 0 means that you're very clean. A score of 100 means you're very corrupt. Corruption is a dilemma even for countries rated as very clean. The United States, for example, ranked as the 19th least corrupt country, but it still has plenty of exposure to corruption. Some U.S. allies and major trading partners like China rank much lower.
Why is a report like this important?
A report like this is important because it gives you some perspective on how bad the problem is. and where some of the worst areas are. And also, it can give some points. These are countries that are doing better. These are some things other countries can copy to reduce the problem.
Our thanks again to VOA's Jeff Seldin.